parle très vite. Bonsoir à tous, un plaisir comme toujours. Pardonnez-moi pour hier soir, j'ai pas pu faire le podcast parce qu'on a eu tous ces problèmes, etc. Mais je voudrais aller avant avec toujours ce texte. On change maintenant en anglais. The 60s Without Apology and the Thousand Plateaus of Vietnam. We hopefully know that Gilles Deleuze detested any form of television communication or opinion debates, etc. So I'm just going to mention very quickly a few things just because I give in to sin and temptation. But first I wanted to mention something curious I found. I think we're on Disarticulations 4, which is just me. I'm trying to talk directly into the microphone because I'm not sure if the audio is too good, but to try to read this essay, about 20 pages on the Thousand Plateaus. And if you've seen them before, I'm not going to repeat my motives. But obviously, I mean, I hope if there's anything interesting, because we have had a few viewers, which is very rare for a live podcast, that pick this book up by yourself. You can find it obviously on Amazon, the printed book, which has a lot of good essays. I'm not sponsoring anyone, but there's also, and I'll dig up the website that's giving it away for free, only the essay by Rapaport on the Thousand Plateaus of Vietnam for free right now. So I'll try and get that to you. I'm not going to distribute it for free. I would if I could, but I have all kinds of problems with YouTube and other copyright issues. So if I could, I would, I promise you. But today, people are tightening up the ratchets and things are getting quite difficult. So the first thing I want to say is I just noticed I got a comment on Disarticulations 3, which was not yesterday, the night before, from let me see, because YouTube always blocks comments, and it's not like it was before. I saw it before. Like, it's like I can't even find comments anymore. No, we have ex-Laos, it's going to be an Italian pronunciation. We have ex-Laos, Legale 8534, who sent a link to a YouTube channel, which I quickly looked at, and it seemed to be a video essay about someone talking about Gilles Deleuze's last book, which, according to, I haven't seen enough, so I don't want to get into trouble, but according to the author of that podcast, was Deleuze's last book, and that was called La Grandeur de Karl Marx. And I think, and I repeat, ex-Laos, I'm pronouncing it badly in Italian, ex-Laos, Legale. I mean, he has his own YouTube channel. He does really good stuff, and you know, I have no, I consider him like kind of a digital, you know, friend is a big word, but you know, it's someone positive and who contributes, and so I have absolutely zero against him. And then he writes, will you comment on this essay that puts into the question the name of your channel? So I would have to watch this whole video, first of all, because it's someone talking about Deleuze's last book, The Grandeur of Marx, which, and I believe, I repeat, forgive my pronunciation. Oh my God, what am I doing? I'm destroying all my windows. maybe ex laus legale has seen those, that I absolutely dispute that 100%. I contest that 100%. And I state directly here, and if I am wrong, I will send my few followers free drinks for I don't know how many years, but there's no way in hell, in my opinion, that Deleuze's last books and Deleuze's last books were about the grandeur of Marx. Deleuze wrote a book, Le Grandeur of Yasser Arafat, that is officially published in 1980 something by Deleuze, a great book. And I understand that 100% about the greatness of Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian people being in a state of becoming like the Native Americans and Deleuze. I think if anyone, it's not like this channel is like full of wisdom, or we just have a few stupid videos, but I think we've gone into Elias Sambar, a little bit about the relationship between Elias Sambar, once again, is one of the greatest Palestinian poets and writers in the history of Palestine, and he met first Félix Guattari, then Gilles Deleuze. Gilles Deleuze did various interviews with Elias Sambar, and then Deleuze wrote The Greatness of Yasser Arafat. But as I've always said, for me, it's virtually impossible. And I think if you look at some of our very first podcasts, and I know they're boring, they're too long, they're 4 hours, we're trying to shave them down and make them, not so long and boring, but I could dig up places where I directly said that that all comes from Tony Negri, and Franco Berardi, Tony Negri, these were... Tony Negri, let's say, was an Italian philosopher who was involved in l'operaismo, who had to flee Italy in the 70s, in the anni di piombo, the years of lead, when the communists were bombing banks and public squares, and then the fascists and probably Operation Gladio, the CIA, were doing the same, bombing train stations and bringing the communists. Just a big, huge mess. The fascists against communists, and they fled to France. And for me, it's absolutely clear that there's no final book for Gilles Deleuze on Karl Marx. And the final book by Gilles Deleuze is pure immanence, and I will repeat 1,000 times, it's logical. You have worked your whole life on the concept of immanence, on the vertigine de l'immanence, on the vertigo of immanence, True immanence is a vertigo. Our head should spin, our eyes should be filled with blood if we accept that concept, You worked your whole life trying, like Spinoza, to weed out transcendence everywhere you could, Like for Spinoza, a war, we have to destroy transcendence everywhere and go to pure immanence. And for me, it's perfectly logical that the last thing that Deleuze wrote was about pure immanence, which is kind of even a step beyond Spinoza, when immanence is immanent to nothing other than immanence itself. And that is, Deleuze went all the way. It's impossible that in the end of life he was going to sit there and be thinking about capital. And Karl Marx is best dealt with by Deleuze in difference and repetition. Karl Marx, I cite him always. He's a philosopher, a great and true philosopher. If you go to difference and repetition, Deleuze will talk about Karl Marx like on the level of Plato in terms of ideas, and then afterwards we know it's going to get complicated, idea, concept, what's the difference, etc., which is imminent, which is non-imminent, but there's no doubt that Deleuze had a great respect for Marx as a philosopher, and the concept of capitalism being essentially an idea of immanence. But once again, I've only watched a few minutes of this podcast, and I know it was sent in good faith. The only thing that's a little strange is that he says, does it put in question the name of your channel? I have absolutely no clue. I repeat, the name of my channel is, and I'll just explain to everyone, I grew up with Deleuze. I graduated in a majors in architecture, a minor in philosophy. Right now I'm finishing my master's in philosophy, but I was always kind of very irritated by the fact that afterwards, after the death of Deleuze, there was this very big commercialization of this big marketing effort in which everyone was Deleuzian, architecture, everything, was Deleuzian. And I honestly believe that, these were people that were just profiting from the name and taking the concept and saying smooth space. So, this is a classic, yeah? I'm an architect in 2000, and so I'm going to design a building in which everything is a sphere. It's a series of bubbles. Why? Because bubbles are smooth space. Why? Because bubbles, you have no X, Y, Z axes. And therefore, you're lost in this smooth space. And I was saying, but you guys are fucking imbeciles, no? The classic example in architecture of smooth space is the cathedrals. You fucking dummy morons. It's the cathedrals. You're just taking an idea, a concept which you can't understand, and you're commercializing it, so you write books. Maybe a lot of these guys, I know all the names, they build these bubble buildings with LED lights, and they're the LEDs flash, and therefore it's smooth space. Because no, you fucking morons, smooth space, what are the examples that Deleuze gave you? You have to think and create the new examples, no? I think I'm getting too angry. My computer screen is shutting off, no? It's shutting down again. The sea, the ocean, before it was mapped. The submarines, why? Because they're way down here, and that's not all mapped yet, no? The desert, how much of the desert is mapped? Gothic cathedrals, why? Because they built the cathedrals in a state of immanence, not in a transcendental way. So you can't just say I'm making all these bubbles, so Deleuze Modeste, to be honest with anyone here, just comes from the fact that we have to shuck off all that shit. Honestly, excuse my French, the people. A lot of people made a lot of money. They were doing summer camps on Deleuze and all kinds of this crap, and it's I don't want to get mad, but I'm telling you, it's not good. So our name, Deleuze Modeste, just means let's go back and get rid of all the garbage, all the commercialization, all of the marketing, all of the money made off of all those stupid morons in academia who are writing articles and making money everywhere, and get back to the simple concepts. And that's the beauty of it, no? Otherwise, I mean, to get to another point, if there's anyone that would detest dogma, it was Gilles Deleuze, no? I can't sit here and like be dogmatic and like it's a religion and no. Deleuze was heretical, and I truly believe that Deleuze would appreciate people that were equally as heretical. That means taking risks, jumping out into new things, you know? Henri Bergson, at the end of the 18th century, was very, very famous. Then he did his debate with Einstein on general relativity, in which Bergson bombed everything because he couldn't understand the math, and then he completely fell from being famous to being absolutely nothing, no? The people that would go to Bergson lectures were shamans, like yoga lovers, in today's equivalent, and people that are like mind, energy, spiritual, no? Let's light the incense and then om. But Deleuze resurrected a philosopher in Henri Bergson who was completely dead, and like we all know, Deleuzians, that Deleuze buggered him, not a nice word, but whatever, and gave a child to a kind of Deleuze Bergson, but that bastard child was philosophically, especially with intuition, extremely rigorous, no? So the point is, if you're a Deleuzian, you can't just sit here and, you know, attach yourself to dogma, and we have to be like that. We have to, no, you have to take risks. You have to take risks. And if I would teach anyone, take risks and fail. Fuck it up, mess it up. But if you don't take risks, why are we here? No? You want to be a freaking Kant, expert in Kant your whole life. You're happy with that. If you're happy with that, good for you, huh? But I think if there's anyone that would teach you, go out there, take risks, do something new, that's Gilles Deleuze, huh? So, I repeat, at least the name of this channel was created that way, in a very humble way, and the whole point is, you know, let's cut the crap and get to the texts and not be so fucking arrogant like all these. I apologize. Like all of these scholars are, like, you know, they're talking for God or whatever. It's fucking boring. I mean, this should be an adventure. Deleuze always said that. Deleuze in the university was hated. They always said for years, everyone was waiting for Deleuze to die because they could go back to normal. They could go back to the way it was when you just read boring text and you knew everything and blah, blah, blah. Deleuze was always considered like Alain Badiou. You can read that anywhere. Was a Maoist. He hated Deleuze. He sent his students to sabotage Deleuze's classes because Deleuze had the balls to say that, look, you know, you communists are just as bad. That you're so absorbed with power. You're just as bad, you know, as fascist, more or less, or as no. But Deleuze will go to his class and he'll be sabotaged by all of Badiou's students on his instructions. So, once again, the whole point of this name is just that it's something very simple and humble. If anyone has problems with that, sue me, do what you need to do. I have no regrets whatsoever. So, and now I've been wasting way too much time because I wanted to talk about two other stupid things and lost my post-it notes even. But I shouldn't talk about this stuff, but I can't believe I lost my post-it note. That's incredible. Our thumbnail is done by, this is for people who are interested in AI image generation. Our thumbnail is done on a relatively sophisticated version of Flux, who everyone says is the Mid-Journey killer. Today I went on the internet and apparently there's another Flux Mid-Journey killer, but I was very, very impressed by Flux. But I repeat, it's just a big mess because, you know, all these companies went to the market and now they're merging. I don't remember the names, but Flux came from 4 people that worked for Stable Diffusion. They argued, they left, and they created Flux. So Flux theoretically is the original programmers from Stable Diffusion, which have done a better model. Midjourney was abandoned by X amount of programmers who created a new one, which came out today, which is, you know, it's just, we're still in this period of where image generation and video generation is kind of in the Wild West, where everyone is against everyone, people buying out other people. But I still believe that for people that need, it's not art, obviously, but for people who are interested in creating content or short videos, I do think, contrary to what the press is saying, that we are making progress. At what cost, I have no idea. That was my first point. My second point, just to be annoying, is that I watched the other day the Joe Rogan podcast and had a good laugh there because he invited an English philosopher, and obviously we all know the Joe Rogan podcast is not, you know, the best place for cutting edge philosophy, etc., etc. However, I've always found the podcast kind of enjoyable, and kudos to him for giving space to a philosopher who I can't remember his name. I'm not even going to dig it up, but if you're interested, it was like today is the 24th of August. It was like the 22nd of August. But what struck me is they were talking about the multiverse, you know, because a philosopher today has to talk about the multiverse. So he was sitting there saying, well, you know, Joe, the problem is that philosophy, you know, still has to catch up to science. And I'm like, yeah, perfect. That's all Rieberg showed. No, great. Okay, thank you very much. And he's like, so, you know, the problem is with the multiverse is that you have all of these infinite amounts of multiverses, some good, some bad, you know, but for humanity, the real risk is to avoid falling into a bad multiverse, no? And he was saying, like, maybe, you know, we're talking right now in English and then we fall into a multiverse where we speak in Mexican. Maybe we fall into a multiverse where I take her to Chainsaw and kill you, etc., etc. When I was watching this, I was kind of laughing, like, why was I laughing? Because obviously the first thing that came to mind for me was Leibniz, no? The Best of Possible Worlds by Leibniz. That is 1750, 1730, where Leibniz was already talking about the multiverse. And Deleuze picks this up, obviously in Le Pli, the Fold, and the Baroque. But Leibniz was ridiculed for at least a century for his concept of the multiverse, meaning Leibniz, and this is a time, Spinoza, Leibniz, let's remember when theology, philosophy, and perhaps, especially in the case of Leibniz, were still united, no? So, especially for Leibniz, the multiverse was an infinite possibility of worlds. And this is where Deleuze picks it up, but he's following Leibniz. And if you're a Bergsonian, Deleuzian, you will get this perfectly. But in the end, Leibniz says there's only one actual, real world. So what is the role of God for Leibniz? Leibniz said, and was ridiculed for at least 150 years, for saying that God's role was to perform an infinitesimal calculus on all of the infinite possible worlds to create the best possible world, which is our world, which is the only world. Think of Bergson. There's an infinity of durations, but only one duration. Think of Spinoza, the one, the all. That's Deleuze, you know? Leibniz is right there. There are an infinite possibility of worlds, but God's job is to perform infinitesimal calculus, because he was a mathematician, in order to guarantee that the one real existing world, and there's only one, sorry for Marvel Spider-Man fans, but there's only one real, actual world in the end. There's an infinity of virtual worlds, no? But the guy on the Joe Rogan show, I remember his name, you know, he explained it pretty well. He said, look, if you have an infinity of worlds, maybe there's a world where we're all angels. Maybe, and you have, like, many of them. Maybe there's a world where, like, we're all devils and we're all cannibals and we all eat each other and kill each other for sight, no? I mean, if you're going to say there's an infinity of possible worlds, then you're going to have the best possible worlds, you're going to have the worst possible worlds, and then you're going to have an infinite series of variations based on, quite frankly, I would say, like, the quality of the people in each infinite world. So that's why, according to Deleuze, Leibniz says there can be only one world. So we go from Christ, you know, and we have to do, what would you call it today? A spline. Yes. Differential calculus is about curves. So we're going to do a spline and we're going to do a node. For those of you who know drafting programs or Adobe Illustrator, and then we're going to pull that node up and pull that curve down, and then we're going to get to Caesar, and then we're going to get to the point where Caesar crossed the Rubicon, and which was a point of no return. And then Caesar will go on to conquer Rome, and then etc., etc. The whole point by Leibniz is that God's job, obviously today we can't say things like that, but the job of someone is to condense this infinity of possible worlds into one concrete world. So I just thought it was ironic because you know, this guy was just sitting there like, so we have a multiverse, an infinity of possible worlds, but the real risk, this is a philosopher, the real risk in the future is that, you know, we might somehow fall into another world while, and therefore it's going to be much worse and much, and, you know, I was like, bro, how are you going to fall into another world, you know? A wormhole, a black hole, bad coffee, I drank too much, and I mean, just to show you that today, philosophy, we are not doing so well. The next issue, the last one, I just wanted to quickly mention that really quick here, it's all over, it's old news by now because today everything happens and no one gives a fuck anymore, but sometimes I ask myself, what in the fuck, like, if our world leaders have any brains anymore? I'm specifically talking about the West, no? And my specific reference was this attack by NATO, apparently together with European countries and the United States and the CIA and English M6, with German tanks, with American Bradley tanks, with HIMARS missiles, with Patriot missile systems. They went and did this kind of absolutely loopy, nutty joyride into Russia. This is like 10 days ago, I think, towards Kursk, in which, like, obviously this thing was planned very well, and they knew that at that perfect moment they could run in with, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 highly trained soldiers, most of which were probably NATO-based, French, American, English, a few hundred Ukrainian. They had studied, prepared for this, so, they made this kind of joyride up to get to Kursk. But, like, for me, a joyride is like, I don't know. When I was young, maybe my father had a Porsche, and I could run her at midnight and run into the Porsche, go into the highway and go 300 kilometers per hour for about 1 hour, and then I'm going to get arrested. So, in the end, obviously, Russia completely obliterated all of these people, destroyed all of the machinery in the most brutal way imaginable. But what I was asking myself was, like, what in the fuck do you think you are doing? I mean, what a bunch of absolute morons you are. One, do you not understand that Kursk is a symbol from the Second World War of the Russian defense against Nazi Germany? Do you think the Russians are going to sleep and just let you drive all the way up to Kursk and conquer it? I mean, first thing, like, total ignorance, no knowledge of history. Second thing, the road up to Kursk is full of just small villages. Like, you can go up there and then you're not going to get any resistance because it's just very dotted, no resistance, no? So you can do your joyride up to Kursk, and in the end, everyone, all of those soldiers got obliterated. Ukraine is now collapsing everywhere along the front lines. Russia is going to be within 30 kilometers of Kiev. We all know that Putin, Russia, does not want to conquer Ukraine. They do not want to govern it. They just want the Russian parts. But my question is, like, the intelligence level of NATO and these countries that are giving, like, billions and billions of dollars, do they have any connection with reality whatsoever? And that's something that disturbs me, because like we all know, we're all nuclear armed, but I mean, you can't have whatever. I don't want to lose time on this because I've wasted enough time already. Let's see if I can find my last page. This is back to the 1,000 plateaus. Let's try and start off here. No. I've lost a few pages. So I'm going to go ahead. For us, the violence and terror which occurred appeared illegitimate and ethically perverse. That sudden blitz out of nowhere and the mysterious dissolution of the enemy. It was a violence which we could not experience as violence, for nothing really felt like it engaged anything else. There's just catastrophe and medevac. So I'm going to skip ahead because I think we read that. All of our military forces, these are the American forces, were split up into separate units and separate operations, again as a general rule. One group may have been extraordinarily well supplied, another stricken by internal dissension, which no officer could reconcile, another refusing to go out on missions beyond a certain point. Moreover, certain zones of Vietnam may even have been dumping groups for recalcitrant units, territories of the damned, internal penal colonies with a deterritorializing machinery of war, like the Russian front in World War II, where the Nazis sent undesirables. So, pretty easy and well-known reference to the Second World War, where Hitler dumped basically all of his the patients in his mental asylums and dropped them directly into war. So, within the core, the penal colony within a penal colony. So there, obviously, we have a double penal colony. Nam as gulag for the lower classes in America. As a re-education center, sorry, my camera zoomed on me, I'll fix that. As a re-education center for bad boys who did not make it to college or for former inmates. Let's see, zoom out further. Oh, whoa, whoa. Thank you very much. So once again, we have on one side, the Vietnamese, like Hitler, like Stalin, were dumping the patients into their asylums, directly arming them, sending them to the war zone. The Vietnamese did it. And we're saying here, for America, it was a re-education center for bad boys who did not make it to college or former inmates. So once again, we're going to pick up, like, in theory, the worst people we can for war. At the draft board in Santa Ana, California, a man in a red plaid shirt looks across a long table. Jew boy, you going. Jew boy, you are going to Vietnam. There were ex-cons too, and former mental patients, people with violent tendencies. Within the individual unit, a fracturing of contacts, for there were many non-communicators, and those plugged-in people who were upward bound ended up in swamps with bullets in their back. Some called it friendly fire. So, quite simple. I think the point is that upper-class people that tried to keep their distance ended up getting shot down by friendly fire. Probably something pretty common in warfare. And for the dead, no climax. And for the living, no relief. There are always eager replacements. The plateau is always in flux or in movement. Even fragging did not put an end to sergeants, lieutenants, captains, majors, and so on. It is not as if we didn't try to talk about the American Army as a corps sans organe goes somewhat against the thesis of Deleuze and Guattari about nomad versus the state, because in Vietnam, it was the culture of capitalism which played the nomadic role of crazy, and the communists, who were curiously well-directed and unified, much more than we care to believe. As Michel Hare writes in Dispatches, going crazy was built into the tour. Or, as a SEAL scout puts it, the off times are just as insane as the on-duty times. We'd get in fights and blow things up. We didn't make much distinction about who the enemy was. All you were supposed to do over there in Vietnam was to be crazy. The American intervention, a play of territorialization, deterritorialization, re-territorialization, a movement in which zones will be captured, cleaned out, and then let go again to other forces, in which people will be pacified, killed, or relocated, their property annihilated, their bodies often tortured for information, then left to rot in camps. So, a quick example, I think, a good example would be Plateau by Oliver Stone, where the American soldiers roll into the camp. They fight amongst themselves. The bad sergeant says they are all Viet Cong. He wants to torture and kill them. The Americans fight amongst themselves. But in the end, despite some unfortunate deaths, re-territorialize the village. They say they're not Viet Cong, so they fix it up. And then I think it's Barnes is the evil sergeant who shoots a young girl. They burn the village, so they deterritorialize it, and then they leave, and the village itself is sent to rot. So you have this whole issue here of, you come to a village, you can't trust it. What do you do? Do you territorialize it? Do you make it American? Do you deterritorialize it? Do you destroy it? Is it already destroyed, deterritorialized? Do you re-territorialize it? And there's so much ambiguity. There was so much ambiguity in Vietnam, and not only. They were eventually let go, dead or alive, only to face relocation again as refugees, perhaps even after the fall of Saigon. An activity that mimicked the soldiers who were suddenly dropped in various strategic zones, pulled out, living, wounded, or dead, rested for a time, and dropped somewhere else, someplace detached from every other place, shuttled back to base or left in the field, who knew where, in that land without places, that body devoid of any real parts. In Vietnam, the American soldier was the nomad. And I think this is a very beautiful passage here. I'm going to underline this. I'm losing on my pages once again. In Vietnam, the American soldier was the nomad. And Rapaport mentions before that this is kind of ironic, because one would presume in a war between communists, an open war between communists and capitalists, that the communist would be the nomad. But in this case, and when I read this, we should understand why. It was the American soldier who was the nomad. And for what reason? We will read it now. The technology. In Vietnam, the American soldier was the nomad, and not so much because he wanted to be, but because that is what the technology demanded of him. That means the technology of the Huey, the Bell Huey, Iroquois, the Iroquois Huey H-1 helicopters demanded that the American soldier be a nomad. Why a nomad? Because there were no front lines. The entire country was accessible at any point, at any time. The helicopter will pick you up here and drop you off behind the so-called front line, behind the enemy lines, to the mountains. Here, you see, when I think before this, when I said that a plateau, you can pretty easily equate that with smooth space, you know? So Deleuze and Guattari say, easiest example, smooth space, the ocean or the desert. If I leave you in a desert with a compass, you're fucked. If I leave you in the ocean with a compass, you're equally fucked. But the ocean before, it was mapped. So the ocean before, Europe discovered South America, North America, the Orient, etc. Yeah, the ocean was smooth space because there was no sense of orientation. There was no knowledge. If you go north, what happens? If you go south, what happens? No idea. You're Magellan, you're Christopher Columbus, you go northwest 38 degrees, following the sun, what happens? Don't know. No idea, no? And that is the literal definition of smooth space. And then, I would love to get into this someday, but this is a Riemann, if you want to get into mathematics. If I take this page and I crumple it and make it into, I don't want to crumple this poor page, is part of my book, but if I crumple it into a small ball, I'm going to get into a kind, it gets complicated, but a kind of smooth space. Now, obviously, this page, I orient myself, I read from left to right, but if it's a blank page and I crumple it, it's going to be full of small triangles or polygons, and then the relations between other polygons on the crumpled page will become a sort of smooth space. But I would, like I said before, this is Deleuze Modeste. Let's just keep things simple. The ocean, before, it was mapped out with smooth space. Why? Because before, it was mapped out by trial and error. It took centuries, millennia. But then when all the ships had trading routes and all the ships got everywhere, there's a map and it's striated. It's no longer smooth, you know? But before that, it was smooth because if you just went out from Portugal and you headed out, you had no fucking clue where you're going, what you're going to find. And the axes of orientation were absolutely no guarantee that you would come to an end. So you could kind of equate that with a kind of plateau, like we're saying here in Vietnam. The technology of the helicopter demanded that the American soldier became a nomad. The nomad means he lives in a smooth space, in a plateau which is already a smooth space. So you have, and there are various plateaus in Vietnam. It's composed only of plateaus, and they're all in movement, and it's hyper-articulated, and they're Buddhists, and then communists, then MVA, Cambodians. It's just intensely rich and dense. Plateau, the continuing movement, and the Americans, soldiers, were forced by technology to be a nomad inside of the plateau. So, you know, like I said before, I'm sure I'm repetitive and you guys understand it. So, Hare writes, air mobility, dig it. You weren't going anywhere. It made you feel safe. It made you feel omni. But it was only a stunt. Technology. Mobility was just mobility. So this is obviously a quote from a helicopter pilot who said, yeah, man, dig it, they gave us air mobility, but it made us think, that we were safe, but in reality, in the plateau, there is no guarantee of safety, absolutely. So here too, a plateau is being described in which even most apparently libidinal movement cannot climax. So right now it's pretty late. I'm going to have to shut down pretty quick. I haven't even lit my cigarette, but from here on in, the word libidinal and the idea of the plateau and technology, let's keep in mind they're going to be very, very close together. So once again, here too, a plateau is being described in which even the most apparently libidinal movement cannot climax. It is this nomadic movement, this production of the plateau, disarticulated from all others, the capitalist industry made possible in the skies of Vietnam when it created the Chinook, which rode a boundless cushion, experienced as if without limits, and which produced the sense of a landscape at every point accessible, penetrable, and non-restricted, a panopticon in theory, overlooking the rhizome, but from within and not realizing that. So once again, here I confess I'm probably too big of a fan of the Huey Iroquois. Here what we're saying obviously is that the Chinook was technologically superior, but it gave the sense that you were above the rhizome in a kind of panopticon, Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault, what does that mean? Are you name dropping? That's not cool. So, Michel Foucault, the panopticon is a model from the 18th century of an ideal prison created by the state, in which you have two spheres, two cylinders, sorry. An inner cylinder where you have all the police, and then an outer cylinder where you have all the prisoners. So the prisoners always feel that they're under surveillance 24 hours. And that's the sense of the panopticon, no? You put the police, let's just make it one-dimensional. I'm fucking bored of 2 and 3 dimensions. Fuck it all. 1 dimensions are much more fun. Let's go there. And talk in 1 dimensions. I'm so bored of the rest, and I'm not joking on this point, but if we make the panopticon, which is from Discipline and Punish, or Discipline and Punishment, I call it, by Michel Foucault, in 1 dimension, you have an inner circle with the state, a police officer, and you have 1 outer circle, and that's where you close the prisoners in. And in the inner circle, the person can turn around 360 degrees and watch the prisoner all day to make sure they're not doing bad things, no? But at the same time, the point is the prisoner interiorizes the sense of being watched 24 hours a day, and therefore kind of moves into some sort of... I've got some weird thumbs up here. I don't know where that comes from, but if anyone sent me a thumbs up, thank you very much. I didn't do that, I don't think, huh? Anyway, basic Foucault 101, and if we get me going in the subject, I saw, and we can't lose time on YouTube, because like we know, YouTube can be fun, it's the new television, but we can't go there. But I saw some kind of thing on YouTube attacking Michel Foucault, and I burned with anger. I burned with anger. And I'm not sure if it was Jordan Peterson, who I can't stand, but oh my God, I'll dig it up. But that really offended me. And it's rare that Michel Foucault pops up. So when I saw that, I was kind of like, what in the name of Johnson is going on here? So anyway, the Chinook rode a boundless cushion experienced as if without limits, and which produced the sense of a landscape at every point accessible, penetrable, non-restricted, a panopticon, in theory overlooking the rhizome, but from within, and not realizing that. So I'm being repetitive here, but once again, one would imagine that with the Chinook, or with my beloved Huey Iroquois, the idea is the helicopter, you are above the plateau, but that was an illusion. You're in the plateau, and when they would shoot you down with Soviet missiles, the soldiers, unfortunately, would understand that fact. The Chinook dust off even the Cobra. Back in the States, so many vets still hear the choppers overhead. The sound of the blades pitched just right, and the thought, I'm going to get airlifted. They're going to get me out of here right now, any moment. They're going to land, pick me up, take me away. So anyone who loves Apocalypse Now, Coppola, the sound of the rotation, of the helicopter is consistent throughout the film, and this kind of, dare I say, libidinal relation to the sound of. Anyway, guys, 5 more minutes. It's almost 2 o'clock here. Let's smoke a cigarette and try one more paragraph. And for anyone who is brave enough to watch this, in a couple of 2-3 minutes, we should be finished here. So, not only air power, but tape power accompanies the men in the hovercraft, which is to say the Vietnam conflict was the first rock and roll war. So when we're talking about tape, we're talking about tape cassettes, audio tape, interjected into the technology. The libidinal impulses of rock and roll became the lure by which some men killed with pleasure, the lure of heavy metal. Certainly, we don't want to give the impression soldiers walked through the jungles with blaring radios, or that all chopper pilots fought to light my fire. Nevertheless, rock had its influence too. Certainly, if the Frankfurt School could argue that rationality legitimized technology and its applications in capitalist society, it must acknowledge too the legitimation of technology not only by means of the military system Herrschaft, but also by incorporation of libidinal pulsations which, strictly speaking, reproduce that Herrschaft, meaning rock groups such as Star, Master, Leader, Hero, Christ figure, via the so-called free market. Pulsations which are not so much rational but desiring, in the sense of Deleuze and Guattari's desiring machines. Such a machine couples continuous flows and partial objects, but itself in turn breaks or punctuates the flows, not unlike a machine gun. And it is this breaking which produces the sense of plateau, the wearing down of that feeling of being omnipotent. So in the God's name am I doing? Sorry, I'm just burning my place down with my cigarette. That was a nice mouse pad, not anymore. So I think we're not too far from the end, and I will pick up tomorrow for sure. And I think we're getting into some of the more interesting parts, but still, the plateau in itself, I still find very relevant to today. The concepts of molecular articulation, disarticulation are still very, very relevant, not only to warfare, but to cultural society today. I know in the last few weeks, I'm not too well informed, but the riots in England, that is clearly a case for me of disarticulation, in which, for various reasons, which to me by now are pretty clear, we have to separate people by gender, by religion, by whatever. Separation is this disarticulation in which, people that may once have lived together now today must be disarticulated. So, the disarticulation of territories is very relevant. Plateaus as well. How do you define a plateau? I mean, I think all this stuff in warfare, but also in modern cultural society, especially in Europe, the United States is still high. This is what's going on, essentially, not under the guise of warfare. Occasionally, occasionally, yes, but I think these are concepts which you can apply to so many things going on today. And then we'll get into this idea, this relationship between the libidinal, which I think we can very roughly, next time we'll get a better definition, but let's call it a sexual drive, and its relation to technology. I believe is something that Deleuze and Guattari have always proposed. And here, quite frankly, what Rapaport is saying, and we'll develop that a little more next time with his text, is that for the soldiers in Vietnam, what was needed was, in order to kill, was one, a certain type of technology, that means a certain type of weapon, and two, a certain type of libidinal relationship with that weapon. And in just very bluntly, right now he's talking about rock and roll. So, like, for example, let's turn on, Jimi Hendrix and then squeeze the trigger and shoot like, 800 rounds on your, MCN. Rapaport, and I believe this to be consistent with Deleuze and Guattari, that's libidinal. At a certain point, which we'll get to, he's kind of saying it's almost like you want to fuck your enemy, you want to kill him. My apologies, excuse my Hungarian, we're on YouTube, etc., but that's what it is, you want to squeeze the trigger. It's sensual, it's sexual, it's libidinal, and you want to just hit that and and you want the weapon is specifically designed for this purpose, but at the same time for other reasons, which we'll get into next time. But the important points here to remember are pulsations, which are not so much rational. We're talking about pulsations of the weapons in the plateau. Are not so much as rational, but desiring. I would substitute desiring with libidinal. In this case, quasi-sexual, not 100%, but I would say quasi-sexual. In the sense of Deleuze and Guattari's desiring machine. Such a machine couples continuous flows, bullets, partial objects, limbs, which are the result of the bullets. But itself in turn breaks or punctuates the flows. You stop, not unlike a machine gun. And it is this breaking which produces the sense of plateau, the wearing down of that feeling of being omnipotent. So, my last post-it I'm putting there because that last phrase, I think, which is, and it is this breaking, meaning cut, stop, which produces the sense of plateau, the wearing down of that feeling of being omnipotent, the loss of the sense that you are all powerful, that brings you back into the plateau, which is not about climaxes, victories, or anything orientable, anything you could orient, but it's just, when you stop shooting, when it's over, this libidinal sense of climax is finished. There's silence. There's nothing. You're back in the plateau. You killed nobody, etc., etc. Anyway, guys, I went on for way too long. As always, a pleasure. I hope this is useful to someone, and I'm sure tomorrow, Sunday, we'll be back on, and it'll just take a day or two, and we'll finish this text. So thank you for those few and brave, as always, and I wish you all a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.